not sure this is on. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So as Lara mentioned, I'm, I guess, an unlikely feminist, and in some ways I don't even consider myself a feminist in terms of the term of what that connotates in many ways. 2008, and these were a video of what we were all exposed to in 2008, was an awakening for me personally. I, prior to that, didn't understand what sexism was. It wasn't something that entered my realm of experience in a way that it bothered me. But I was a Hillary Clinton fan, and just watching TV and seeing what was around me, I kept saying, oh my God, how can this be happening? This isn't fair. This isn't right. Look how she's being treated. You know, look how Michelle Obama's being treated. Look how Sarah Palin's being treated. So the one thing we know about sexism is it doesn't know political party. It doesn't know race. It doesn't know age. Sexism is part of our culture. So what I wanted to talk about was how our organization was formed and why we exist and why we are here today, all of us, and why we all should care. And the first slide, again, the term feminism, and I spoke to a women's studies, or I guess gender and women's studies professor before we came in here, and I think, you know, we get to the point of, do we want to take this term back and redefine it to something that is positive and constructive, or do we just leave the term behind and start again? And when we started the new agenda, we were a group of women from around the country. We were so upset by how Hillary was treated, was a raison d'etre for starting our group, but we quickly decided that the way things had been going would not work anymore for women in terms of getting women forward. And so we started something that later, as we started the organization, we called the pro-woman movement, which is what we are, which is for women. What we decided in that first meeting, because we were not women who were in women's groups and so forth, we were women who were in different careers, diverse from around the country. And it's hard to tell from this slide, but there are 52 women and 48 men, because our country is 52% women. And actually, the young woman who made my slides for me, originally I had them pink and blue, and she said to me, you can't have pink and blue, that's gender stereotyping. So we did Halloween colors, because that's all I could think of. But you know, our notion, because a lot of us were business people at the first meeting, is if we're 52% of the population, why are we so underrepresented? We have to figure out a way to get women to work together, because we're divided. This is political party. Women are split roughly, depending on the election, half and half between political party. And then we're split again by whether we're pro-life or pro-choice. So women never effectively function as a voting bloc. We basically split ourselves in half. And the women's organizations and feminism has, up until now, been relatively exclusive. If you didn't fit into be the right color here and the right slide here, you weren't allowed in. So basically, a quarter of women, or a quarter of our population, was allowed in and welcomed. And that didn't make a lot of sense to us. So we decided that we were going to do something different, which was to be inclusive. I mean, it just made good business sense to us. And here's why. And this is something that you probably don't realize unless you look at the numbers, but women are actually moving backwards by many, many measures. And I know it doesn't seem that way, because you get to college and it's 50-50, and you hear about how the approval rates, and there's more and more women going to college and whatnot. And that is all true, okay? College is the last realm of your existence where everything is going to be fair. And I'm sorry to tell you that this is reality, okay? Everything in college is fair, because colleges have admissions and they want to have roughly half women and half men. They want to have all sorts of diverse measures, because this is the way college looks at everything. Your professors, not all your professors, but on average, your professors are going to judge you fairly. And this is your last realm of what's fair. When you leave college and you go into the real world, it's no longer going to be fair. And so what our job is at the New Agenda is to create a realm of possibility for you all to reach your full potential. And because you're students and you're not going to be graded on this, but you probably want to know the answer before we start. The answer to this, and we're a very pragmatic solution, oriented organization. The woman who's our vice president works at Morgan Stanley, and she always says, stop whining about things and find solutions. That's what we're about. The solution is unity and women finding common ground and ways to support each other. We live in a culture where men naturally develop these type of bonds and have developed these kind of bonds in many different segments of our culture, through fraternities, through teams, through alumni associations, and these kinds of things, once you get into the real world and things stop being fair, start to matter a lot more. So we're going to talk about that as we go. This slide, and again, excuse the Halloween colors, but I made the woman orange. There are 17 women and 83 men. This is our Congress. There are 17 women in Senate and 83 men. There are 73 women in our House of Representatives, and Larry, you can tell me how many men, but 435 minus 73. Okay. This is women presidents. This actual video is much, much longer, but this is just some of the highlights of the countries around the world that have women presidents. Almost every developed country around the world, and many less developed countries, have had women leaders. Perhaps the only country that hasn't had a woman leader that we consider a very developed country is the United States of America. So technically we're not going backwards, because even as a math nerd I know you can't go lower than 0. But there's not even any hopes of us getting there in the short term on this election, other than possibly Michelle Bachmann pulling off some sort of surprise. But these are all countries that have had women leaders. And I just want to throw out a question. Where do you think the United States ranks in terms of how many women we have in government in the world? Just throw out a number. Where do you think we rank in the world? Because we're a very developed country. What? You're right, 84th. We're 84th in the world in terms of our representation of women in government. All these countries have been led by women. Another place we're moving backwards is in corporate America. I graduated college in 1987. I know that's hard to believe by how I look. I'm kidding. But at that point, everything was moving upwards. We were making progress. There was great hope. There was no feeling when we left college that we weren't going to be welcomed and to succeed in whatever career field we went into. Here's the reality. When you look at Fortune 500 CEOs and Fortune 500 officers, we've actually gone down. We peaked off in 2005 and we're moving back downward. So when you hear that women are making great advances, it's not true. Even more disturbing, we only have 12 CEOs now out of women, and that's 12 out of 500. Those are Fortune 500 companies. My career field, Wall Street, women have gone tremendously backward. You would imagine that things would just keep going. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is why that is occurring. Not because there's an easy, ready solution, but because we all need to start to think about it and understand it. And the primary reason is the messaging. This is a video we did called The Evaporating Woman, the woman on Wall Street.
Where, oh where are the heroines of Wall Street? When I graduated from college, they were everywhere. The Tiger Lady.
I need the P&Ls on land overseas, also need the latest DVDs and DVDs. And Robin, I want you to get me the CEO of IBC ASAP. I mean, Fritz, do you remember that night when you told me about the things that I was going to have to give up and the sacrifices that I was going to have to make? Well, I don't want to make those sacrifices. And the bottom line is, nobody should have to.
Tess, who rides the Staten Island ferry to an M&A career.
There isn't any room at the top for local girls like us.
I'm not giving up.
Woman bounded onto Wall Street, assured that we could have it all.
Then something started to go terribly wrong. The message changed.
If you do a good job, and this is a lot in the corporate world as well, when you do a good job, it's not always going to pay off.
The heroines and hopefulness disappeared, replaced by cautionary tales of work, family balance, and the perilous work environment.
And then the women of Wall Street started evaporating. In the last decade, 141,000 women left Wall Street. At the same time, 389,000 men entered. More alarming, in the last decade, the number of young women ages 20 to 24 entering Wall Street has dropped an astounding 22%. The new messaging tells women, stay away, and it's been effective.
And that really is upsetting to me. And even seeing, there's a book that we highlighted, The Woman Who Said You're Not Going to Necessarily Make It. Nina Gotterwalls wrote a book. She had spent 1 year at Morgan Stanley. I happened to have been at Morgan Stanley at the same time she did. I was the 5th highest paid woman in my entire division of 250 women. It was not a gender biased place. She wrote a book about that and then marketed it, and it sells, because that is the message now that people want to tell you, that you can't make it in these places, even places that are meritocracies like Wall Street that are measurable by numbers. The message is stay away. You know, I'm an alumni of Cornell, and I went back and gave this presentation on making it in the real world at Cornell, and two of the women raised their hand and they said, we're being told not to go to corporate America, that it's not a safe place for women. I mean, when did this happen? You know, the fact is it is happening. It's in the messaging all around you. And so we're going to talk about that as much to awaken you, and so you can have these conversations with your friends and start to think about what is reality versus what's the message around you. Here's a definition of sexism. And what we're going to talk about today is what sexism is. We define it with 4 different pillars, but we're going to try to understand sexism and how it impacts your lives from the time that you're young women and teenagers. And then we're going to try to understand how to strip it back away from our lives and improve our prospects as women going forward. One of the ways that we thought was most effective to discuss sexism was to put it into videos, because there's so many people that just don't understand what it is. It's not like a tangible thing that you can easily define. So we launched a series. You just saw one of the videos. It's called Searching for Sexism. Oh, excuse me. Here's the first one that we did. Oh, excuse me. Oh, sorry, that's not the right video. Okay. Well, the message was we went and we interviewed people in upstate New York and asked them what sexism was. And half of the people had no idea what the word meant. Usually when I play this video, people think it's a comedy, but it wasn't meant to be a comedy. We just found that people didn't understand what it was and couldn't define it.
If you want to just keep talking about it.
Okay.
Because I have all the clips. They're just... Is it? Which one?
Here it is. It's actually this one right there.
Nothing really, I don't pay attention to that stuff.
A woman married together, or 2 men together, or 2 women together.
But I think that we're going to eliminate men in 20 years. We won't need them anymore. We're going to have recorded orgasms, and we won't need them more. But to reproduce, we'll have the sperm bank.
Nothing really, I don't pay attention to that stuff.
Okay, you can go back to...
A woman married together, or 2 men together, or 2 women together.
But I think that we're going to eliminate men in 20 years. We won't need them anymore. We're going to have recorded orgasms, and we won't need them more. But to reproduce, we'll have the sperm bank.
Yeah, you can stop it. That's right. Okay. So we'll go back to the slide. So we set out to describe sexism and figure out ways to bring awareness to it through this video series, but then also to break it into pieces that we could be active in and start to lead towards change. And the 4 elements we're going to talk about here, and hopefully this is going to tie together for you at the end, to leave you with a package that you can leave this room with and actually make some positive change in our environment together for women. The first is safety. And that is that women and girls deserve to be safe. And beyond that, beyond the actual safety element, there's a sexualization of us as a gender from the time we're young girls. And this is all new, but these are actual t-shirts that were sold in the fall. A lot of women's organizations, ourselves included, campaigned against that, and they were both pulled. But the messaging is all around us. The internet has great uses, but it also has a lot of drawbacks, and part of that drawback is we are surrounded all the time by TV, movie, video, internet. The messaging is around you. You have to be very conscious of it. From the time you're young girls, these are t-shirts that people buy and wear. And what's the message to a young girl that sees this? You're not valued on what you think, you're valued on what you look. It's better to be dumb and pretty than smart and anything else. Smart doesn't matter. All that matters is what's on the outside. We did a video about this, and this is about the role that all these different mediums play for young women, teenage women going into college, in terms of teen dating violence and eating disorders, how these type of things are impacted.
Okay, I want to ask you guys something, and I want you to be totally honest with me. What is it? Is the side of my face fat from this side? No.
Police have charged a University of Virginia student in the death of one of his classmates.
That compromising photo was forwarded to the cell phones of hundreds of other teens. Jesse became the focus of ridicule and abuse.
And then I hear something, and I look outside in the bitter, freezing cold. She's going through the garbage, out on the curb, looking for something to eat.
And doctors say more and more preteens are pushing away their plates, leading to a new trend called tweenorexia.
These are all dead girls and young women.
This is what I see.
As young children are watching these actors, these television shows, they are seeing these pretend teenagers as the types of role models they want to become.
It's not a big deal. This is what I see. This is what I see. I'm tired of the games, I just want to bet. I'm the one alive, she ever tries to fucking leave a king. I'm tired to bed and set this house on fire. This is what I see. This is what I see.
And how 14 wannabe models transformed into some fierce fashionistas.
Yes.
Right there.
This is what I see.
And then I got a text from A, whoever that is, cluing me into the real reason you got skinny last summer.
A sent you a text?
I was eating 3 almonds a day, and you were getting liposuction?
No, that's not true.
And you wonder why.
And you wonder why.
And you wonder why.
I look in the mirror and see a fat girl.
I haven't eaten anything since breakfast. I texted my boyfriend a naked picture of me.
I didn't tell my parents who my boyfriend hit me again.
I know what you're thinking.
So I just wanted to ask in this audience, how many of you recognize any of those TV shows or books or, okay, raise your hand if you don't recognize any of those books or TV shows, or one person, 2 people. Okay, So that is the messaging that is around us. And that's why it's so important that you recognize the diet you're being fed. This is not reality. This is a reality self that's being imposed on you. And you're being taught to define yourself on how you look on the outside, and that is how you value yourself. And here's what it's led to. This is Liz Claiborne just came out with a study of college women. Nearly 1 in 3 college women reports having been a victim of abuse during her lifetime, up until college. So 1 in 3, and I'm assuming some women in your room, obviously in this room, I'm obviously not going to ask you to raise your hands, have either been victims of rape or attempted rape. 52% of people know someone in college. I think that's a vast understatement. I tell you, when I speak to colleges and I ask women, how many of you know a friend who has been a victim of rape or sexual assault? I'm not asking you to raise your hands, but I'm guessing almost everybody in this room would raise their hand. Here's the troubling part. 58% of students said they would not know who to go to if they were a victim or if they had a friend that was a victim. So you have my card and our website, so come to me if it ever happens to you. But barring that, we need to start to build an awareness that this is not okay. This is not acceptable. And we're also going to talk about how there's a tremendous amount of victim blaming. It's not your fault, and it's not that you should define yourself on the outside. The fact that this is happening is because we've created an environment through media and pop culture where we've dumbed down our expectations of what's acceptable to young women. And by becoming aware and having a conversation, we have to together put an end to this. The next element of sexism is opportunity. And because of what we just talked about with safety and the way young women are being taught to define themselves, that impacts what you think your prospects are going out to the world. That's why you don't necessarily think you should go into math. You know, Lara, or I think it was Helen, who said 85% of the math majors at the school are men. The messaging to women when I'm allergic to algebra as a little girl, this didn't come about from nowhere. I started off as a math major. There were plenty of women math majors when I went to school. This is the messaging that's being taught to you, that these are not things that girls should do. Going back to fairness, we talk about the gender wage gap. This is somewhat of an old chart, but the message is the same. When you leave college, and there was a study that came out in the USA Today over the summer, and all the conservatives cheered of, oh, see, everything is equal. Because when women leave college, they make roughly the same amount as men do. But that doesn't remain the reality. There's 2 factors. One is what we've been talking about, that women are being pushed to careers that are naturally less profitable. You know, some people call it the pink ghetto. We go into teaching, we go into things to help people like psychology. That's what we're being told. We're being told, like we saw in the video on Wall Street, if you go there, you're not going to make it. It's not a good place for women. And these messages feed on themselves. So what ends up happening is we go into careers that are less profitable, but also what happens is what we talked about earlier about fairness. This is your last years of fair. When you go into the real world, things change. Promotions are based on who you know, your networks, being in the right place at the right time. And women naturally don't think of themselves in ways of deserving. So we're going to talk about some of those in this presentation. And this has been a solution that we've come up with as one of the ways to work around this.
To get women back on track is for women to help other women.
Mentorship is just very important because I have a lot of opposition going on to Wall Street, and just having like a female mentor
gives you motivation to keep on and like realize that it's possible.
I joined a group called Smart Women Lead, and I decided I wanted to be like these women who had tons and tons of accomplishments.
How should I dress in order for a male to look at me, you know, intellectually instead of looking at me physically in a way so he can actually hear my words about what I want to say.
And I decided I wanted to be like these women who had tons and tons of accomplishments.
It has helped me so much to build my confidence. It gives me hope to be very successful on Wall Street and also to have a great career.
Join the new agenda to get women moving forward again.
It's time to mentor up.
The future of mentoring, the Mentor Exchange, coming soon.
And this is the Mentor Exchange, which we're going to be launching next month. And I want to talk to you about our view of mentoring and how to change the trajectory for women. An important element of mentoring has traditionally been women in certain fields helping women that are younger. But we sort of view mentoring as vertical and horizontal. And one of the most important parts of mentoring is with people your own age. That's why we have this website for college women that you all took the card for on the way in. And we encourage you to join. And on our Mentor Exchange, when we launch it next month, there's going to be a place for women in their own career fields to help one another, a forum to discuss topics and ideas. Because what you'll find as you enter the real world is that the contacts that you make in your own age, in your own fields, at other colleges, are going to be the people that rise up with you in your career. You know, my first job that I got on the trading side, I actually interviewed for, it was a woman who was a couple of years older than me from UVA, and I was trying to be very, courteous and whatnot at our first dinner together, and we went to a fancy Japanese place, and I was doing my best to be very nice, and she was kind of a soft-spoken person, so I was being soft-spoken, and they weren't going to hire me because they thought I was too nice. And I know you all don't know me, but that's actually, it is funny. So you can laugh. But it just so happened that I was in a summer house with a lot of people from UVA, and I had mentioned that when we had dinner, and she happened to call one of the women that I was friends with at UVA and say, well, we all really like Amy, but we're really concerned that she's going to be too nice for the job. Needless to say, I got the job. That was how I started my career in sales and trading. But don't underestimate the networks of your own friends, not only at your own college here at Villanova, but that you can make through the Mentor Exchange, through the New Agenda on Campus website, the connections that you're going to build. Those were, when I give talks about building your franchise for you as an employee, males and females, the people that you meet early in your career are going to rise up with you. They're going to be your clients. They're going to be, the people that you go play golf with, women golf too, the people that you go to spas with, the people that you go, I guess I can't say this, but you go out drinking with, or whatever you do in your particular business, those are going to be your contacts, and that is what gives you value as you go up the ladder. Women aren't as good as that because it's somewhat foreign, and we, a big part of what we talk about here is unity and women helping other women. It's women of our own age and as well as their traditional mentoring. So the Mentor Exchange is coming soon. It's going to be a way, not for long-term mentoring, but if you need help in interviewing skills or doing a resume or how to dress or whatnot. That's what the Mentor Exchange is going to be. It's part of our solutions. But I want you all to be thinking about ways to build your networks. And your networks are just as important horizontally as vertically. We're going to talk about unity last because it's the most important, and I already told you that's the answer to making things better. But I want to talk about leadership, or lack thereof, as we talked about in the beginning, how many women are in leadership in all fields. There's a famous saying, you can't be what you can't see. There's a lot of that. And so when you get role models in all the media that are all men or women that are just trying to be pretty and not smart, that is the media messaging that's intended for males 20 to 30, which unfortunately is where most of the advertising dollars go. That's not the message that you should be taking in. This is another video that we did on leadership. Hopefully. Oh, I'm sorry. This is actually, before we get to that, these are women leaders in different fields, and this is part of what our organization actively does, which is to protect women from sexism and to speak out on their behalf. But there's an active war isn't the right word, but it almost feels like a war to bring down women in leadership. When I was on Wall Street, there were 3 women that were close to being CEOs. One of them I'm very close with, Zoe Cruz, who were all eventually fired. Now there's no woman in line. What ends up happening is there's almost a war waged in women in our media. And it's very important. One of the big things that we do as an organization is to bring awareness to that. You know, that was the video when we opened up the presentation in politics of all the different women and how they were treated in 2008. But this is Meg Whitman being called a whore, Kirsten Gillibrand, who's a senator of New York, being called the hottest senator, Arianna Huffington, when she sold the Huffington Post, she had a 50-50 partner. Arianna was criticized terribly, and the other guy, you never heard anything. Kathleen Parker, who was fired off Parker Spitzer, and then, of course, the minute she was fired, the ratings plummeted and the show was taken off the air. But it's natural to scapegoat the woman, and we lose a lot of women leaders that way.
Do you know me? Well, American Express did not know me. Because when I was in the Congress of the United States and I applied for an American Express card, they said I couldn't get one unless my husband signed for it. So I called up my husband and I said, what do you believe? You love me because American Express does, and they want you to sign for my card. He said, I love you, Bella. I wouldn't trade you even for Joe Namath, but American Express is going to have to give you their own card, and I'm going to fight with you until we did. And so, in the Congress of the United States, we passed a credit law in which we were able to get women to get their own credit. And so, I didn't know whether I should really get an American Express card, but I decided I would so I could tell this story. So now I have an American Express card, so I can tell the story. That women fought for their own credit, so American Express had to give in. So carry an American Express card as a symbol of women's right to credit.
There's a reason I played that video, and Kirsten Gillibrand, who has been involved with our organization as well as a young senator from New York, is one of the most vocal advocates of the importance of having women in our government and our leadership. But this best exemplifies to me the practical importance of having women, because there are issues that impact women that you just don't see unless you have women there whose lives are impacted by them to define it for you. This is a classic example, and Kirsten Gillibrand in the Senate fights for things all the time that impact women and children that wouldn't otherwise get brought up. So the importance of having women leaders in realms, you know, not only in government, in corporate America, is extremely important. There's a lot of reasons why women don't run, and I apologize, we lost the footnotes here, but this was a study done by Jennifer Lawless of Brown that came out in 2008, Why Women Don't Run. These are the primary 4 reasons, but I'm going to posit here that these extend well beyond politics, and some of these might sound familiar to those of you in the audience. The rigors of the political campaign, that's sexism. We saw that in the first video. They're less likely to be recruited. That's what I mentioned to you about having other people to kind of pull you up, that we're going to enter the real world on the same trajectory, and then the trajectory is going to change for men and women. Work-life balance and political careers. How many times did we see in that opening video, how is Sarah Palin going to campaign and care for her young children? How's Kirsten Gillibrand going to do that? When's the last time you ever heard that asked of a male candidate? Women are less likely than men to think they are qualified to run. And this is always something that makes me laugh, that people will say, well, Sarah Palin's too dumb to run, but we can have Al Franken, whose criteria was he was a comedian, or Heath Schuler, who was a football player. These are criteria that make you qualified for a government, but being, a governor doesn't make you qualified to be a president. And women are less likely than men to perceive a fair political environment, which unfortunately is correct. This is a video that, I hope this is a video we did on sexism, but this should tie in for you what we talked about early on as we're presented young girls, that they matter, what they look like on the outside, and then this should tie into what's happening to us later in life for women leaders and how they get treated. This is the beginning of one of our Searching for Sexism videos. Oh, sorry, it's the wrong video again. Yeah. Yeah, I don't even see that one. I apologize.
Which is it, one of these?
2. It was in the beginning.
coarseness, sluts is nothing new, and painting successful women in general in this way in order to delegitimize them and to denigrate them is nothing new. Come here, bitch. Come to New York. How do we think
Sorry. So the reason I wanted to show that clip was to show you that all these things have meaning later in life, that the battle to define young girls and teenage women and college women by what they look at on the outside and to tell them that certain places aren't places that they should be, then as we get older becomes a battle to then define us again in those same terms on the out, that we women who are in power are bitches, sluts, and whores, and to define them that way. So I don't need to to make it such that you're so scared when you run out of this room that you don't want to do anything about it. But the fact that you're actually witnessing this and you're probably saying to yourself, you feel like you're watching a car wreck, right? I mean, this stuff is terrible. Like, how can this be? This is just a boiling down what's all around you. Hopefully by watching this stuff and seeing it for what it is, you can emerge and say, hold it, that's not fair and that's not right. And so when I see this on the TV shows, because almost everybody in the room except for 2 raised their hands when we showed the episodes for Searching for Sexism 3 on teen dating violence and eating disorders, when you see this message around you, you can sit down with your friends at lunch and dinner and say, did you see that? Did that make sense to you? Is that really the way we are? Is that really the way I'm supposed to define myself? And start to understand that this is being fed to you, but you don't have to eat it, okay? This next video is Misrepresentation, a clip from their trailer that some of you might have seen.
We're shortchanging voices that are urgently needed in public forums from ever getting to the table. If people knew that Cuba, China, Iraq, and Afghanistan have more women in government than the United States of America, then it would get some people upset.
No wonder we are in such trouble in this country. We've been choosing our national leadership from 6% of the country. As the most powerful country in the world, we're not standing for the right values, the right principles. That's a loss to the world.
So how do we change it? Well, I think what we have in mind as the new agenda is the way to change it. And we talked about unity, and we talked about women finding common ground. There's one thing that you'll notice in this video is that the women who are being discriminated against, the women who are being treated unfairly, as I said, sexism knows no boundaries. Sexism doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't care if you are black or white or old or young or what religion you are, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. Sexism impacts our gender entirely. So to have any form of women's advocacy that doesn't capture something that can help all women, to us just doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm going to show you a chart. This is 2010. They talked about in the misrepresentation clip that women in 2010 was the first election since 1979 that women didn't pick up seats in the Senate and the Congress, which in and of itself is another example of how women are moving backwards. But here is why it's so important that we support getting women into both parties to run, and that we as women, even if we're not going to vote for, say if you're a Republican, even if you're not going to vote for Hillary Clinton, or if you're a Democrat and you're not going to vote for Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann. My mother, when she was alive, used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It's almost like we're trained to attack one another. That when Michelle Bachmann enters the scene, the feminist websites, the first thing they'll do is attack Michelle Bachmann, as opposed to the men in the Republican field who have the same ideology. It's one of those things that in the media is being taught to us in this diet, that we don't need to eat, that we can say, you know what, it's just not for me. I might not agree with everything that they stand for, but I'm also not going to badmouth them. Here's the importance of Republican women making gains. If they hadn't, we would have moved way backwards. We would have lost 10% of our seats in the House, and we would have gone backwards in the Senate for the first time. So it's tremendously important that women support women in their own party. Even if you can't support them by voting for them, support them by not speaking poorly of them. And that's a very important message. They face enough disparate treatment, as you can see in the media. They don't need other women fanning the flames for them. And that's part of the message of unity that reaches in the realms of politics, but it reaches in every other realm that you're going to do it. And so I'm asking you when you leave here today to kind of re-engineer the way you think of things. And I can tell you personally, my greatest accomplishments that I was able to make in Wall Street and in everything I did in life were from bonds that I have made with other women in women's organizations or women's groups, where women helped one another. I was in a sorority, maybe an unnatural sorority, because all the women in my sorority are still friends with each other. We were always there for one another. When I graduated college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. It was actually one of my sorority sisters that said, who was actually nerdy. I was in college, I kind of rebelled against the nerdy part and went out 7 nights a week. But she said to me, oh, Amy, you should go into one of those training programs. It's like a continuation of college at one of the banks. So that's what I did. It wasn't as if I knew in college I wanted to be, you know, a trader on Wall Street. It was because of those connections. So I went into a training program and got into trading and sales. My connections, again, in getting my first job as a trader, my connections then of having mentors and mentees that helped each other. These are all connections, even if they don't pay off immediately, that pay off eventually. And I think it's tremendously important that we as women, and we all spread the word, that we try to find some common ground in what we do and help one another. And if you think it doesn't come back, let me tell you, it always comes back in a very positive way. Women that learn to help other women will find it comes back to them tenfold. So I think it's a very important message that we start to push. This is a book that came out that talked about girls bullying girls and women bullying women, because this is naturally what we've been told that we're supposed to do. There we go. So basically, I wanted to ask in this room, how many of you feel as girls or as women in college you've been bullied by other women? I mean, raise your hand. It's okay to raise your hand. It's no reflection of you. This is how our culture teaches us we're supposed to behave. I think the biological stuff, and again, I'm not one to like build studies and whatnot, but in my experience is bullshit. I think that we're taught as girls in the media, in the TV shows that we watch, that we're supposed to hate each other and fight each other, and that is how we're going to succeed, by stepping on each other. I can tell you that is a strategy that never works. The way to succeed is to support other women and to have them support you back. So if there's the most important takeaway I can give you, you know, I started off with what the solution was in the beginning and the end, and there are pragmatic ways we're going to help you with that, like the mentor exchange. Like if you have a problem with sexual assault, you're going to call me personally and I'm going to get you the help you need. There are ways that we can pragmatically help you, but I'm asking everybody here to go out and lead by example, to you know, speak to your friends at the dinner table tonight and at breakfast or whenever you meet, and talk about the power of building up these franchises together. So when you all go out into the world, that you can be a resource for one another. Think of it, if you have to, as a business, that when we all go out there together, I'm going to know that you're at this company, you're going to be my client, and vice versa. But it's time that we all, as women, start to re-engineer the way we think of ourselves. And I'm going to make an even bigger challenge, that any woman leader who gets on TV and spends all her time attacking women because they don't agree with everything she believes in should not be a woman running a women's group. And that is what we believe. You know, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. But it's time that women stop making a living attacking other women. That's not, if that's feminism, that's not a winning equation. It's got to start young, that we've got to teach our young girls to value themselves on the inside, not the outside. And we've got to teach ourselves as women to find ways to find common ground as we age and as we go through these cycles together, from high school to college to the real world. So that's my conclusion. And if anyone has any questions about anything that I've spoken to, I'd love to field your questions. Thank you.